The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild has edged its way into one of my most favorite games of all time. The sense of exploration I got from climbing each hill to solving every puzzle, no matter how minute, was euphoric to me. When I started playing the Pathless, I was not expecting this at all. All I knew beforehand was that it was developed by Giant Squid, the developers of Absu, and the group that splintered off from the team that made Journey. Which is to say, I expected a game that had great movement. Other than that, who knows? In the Pathless, the world has been shrouded by darkness, the point of origin being an island where the Earth and the Spirit realms meet. You control the Hunter, the last person to venture onto the island and try to discover what has happened. Upon arriving, she finds a giant eagle god, one of the tall ones, sick and dying. The eagle gives the Hunter the Spirit Mask, which allows her to see the god realm as well as other various secrets around the island. She is then tasked with purifying this dying spirit and her corrupted children. This process involves running around the island and collecting light stones, these tablet-looking stones correlating to each of the gods. Each is hidden by a small puzzle. Sometimes the Hunter needs to hop to a place without falling, or maybe shoot an arrow through the correct hole. Once collected, these light stones need to be brought to each of the 3 towers, and once illuminated, these towers purify their associated god. And right off the bat, the Hunter is absolutely sick. Equipped with a bow and infinite arrows, she is able to shoot floating targets around the island. Immediately, the game is already fun to move around in. Holding the trigger locks onto the nearest target, releasing shoots an arrow. If the Hunter is running, she gets a speed boost. If she's in the air, she gets a slight aerial boost. Early on, it becomes so easy to run from point to point, locking on and shooting arrows, flying across the ground and through the air. Only 2 things can interrupt this groove: not holding the trigger long enough, and trees. Not holding long enough will make the arrow fly wild, and trees, well, are just in the way. You can't shoot through trees. But that's not all the movement the game allows for. After beating the first area, the Hunter gets a friend, a small eagle buddy. The eagle helps the Hunter glide, can fly up in the air much higher than the Hunter can jump, and can pick up stuff too heavy for the Hunter to carry. And while the gliding and flapping does redact some of the tighter platforming from the introductory area, it makes moving through the island a joy. In addition to running and jumping, the Eagle's glide opens up the ability to hover right over nasty ground obstacles. Practiced players will now be able to literally fly from point to point. From start to finish, it always felt good to do so. Of course, the Eagle doesn't just open movement abilities, they are also utilized for many puzzles dispersed throughout the area. Puzzles in the Pathless come in a few different flavors, but they all involve shooting an arrow at a thing. Some require the Hunter to shoot through the designated number of holes, others require her to shoot arrows through flames and light a certain number of torches. It's not always that simple though. Oftentimes holes or torches need to be rotated or raised, and to do so, the Hunter will need the Eagle to pick up and place a stone onto a switch, or physically move the hole into place. In addition to light stones, the majority of puzzles will reward the Hunter with lanterns. As she collects more lanterns, a bar slowly fills. Once filled, her eagle friend will gain an additional flap, allowing the Hunter to fly even higher into the air. And that is kinda it. That's the whole game. Go around the island and solve puzzles to purify corrupted gods. That alone is probably the game's strongest virtue, the exploration. Around every bend, in abandoned buildings, sometimes just out in the open, are more and more puzzles to solve. Some are trickier than others, but they all rely on the same building blocks. While playing, I kept relating this experience to how I played Breath of the Wild. Up here on this hill, behind this tree, I noticed something unique to look at. I solve a quick puzzle, and I'm rewarded with something cool. And the world itself is clearly designed to funnel the player in the same way Zelda did. Tall towers glowing red are omnipresent on the horizon, and on the way to them, the Hunter will find numerous secrets, or maybe she'll notice a building up on a hill. And on the way to that building, she'll notice something glowing in a cavern. After exploring the cavern, when she finally climbs up to the building, she's able to look into the distance and find something else interesting. In addition to puzzles, searching the world is also the main way the narrative is told. Scattered across the island are corpses and informational tablets. The tablets detail the gods and what they're about. The corpses give info on the main antagonist, the Godslayer. Using the Spirit Mask, the Hunter is able to read the final thoughts of many a body she comes across. These final mortal moments shed light on what really happened to cause the darkness. And they were always fun to run across. but none of the exploration would really work without the game's art style. The island is a stunningly gorgeous landscape, filled with flowing rivers, tall pine trees, sweeping hills, and the occasional forest animal to boot. The art is a simplistic and stylized 3D with vibrant colors. Even shrouded in darkness, the blues and grays of the rain clouds color the world beautifully. All the trees pop. The rays of light peeking through the clouds look amazing. While the majority of the island is covered in pines, the first time I saw a big tree with golden leaves, I nearly cheered. The character model for the hunter is also striking, simple but memorable, and her eagle friend is absolutely adorable. Sometimes, after the hunter rubs the darkness from the eagle, they hug each other and it is the cutest thing I've ever seen. Oh right, the darkness. Exploring the island isn't the only thing in the game. The hunter also has to look out for the corrupted gods. Spawning in dark red and swirling storm orbs, the gods roam looking for the hunter. If she finds herself caught up in one, the storm knocks away the eagle, and she has to sneak around the god to get her friend back. Upon reaching the eagle, it cries out and ends the storm, but is filled with corruption. If the hunter gets spotted by the god, not only is the eagle still corrupted, but the hunter loses some of the lamp power up too, so it'll take longer to get a new flap. Either way, she then has to rub the underside of the eagle's wings and body until all the badness is gone. That part is really cute. In theory, having to navigate around rampaging gods is a cool idea, but after avoiding each of them once, it becomes more or less just a nuisance. Multiple times the storm would spawn right where the next puzzle I was going to was, so I either had to wait for it to go away, go through and face the god, or just go a different way entirely. And it was really frustrating, especially as I got into the hang of finding puzzles. To find puzzles, I initially just walked around, looked for places I hadn't been yet, and naturally came across whatever I came across. This was probably when I had the most fun with the game, but the Spirit Mask does more than just reveal secrets. While equipped, a pulse is sent from the hunter physician, and any puzzle spots not yet found light up in red. Being a completionist, I realized at the end of the first area that I just needed to find a tall building or cliff, look for the red spots, and travel around the perimeter to hit them all. While it certainly made completing the game easier, it took out so much of the fun Breath of the Wild gave me. I was no longer exploring, I was just following a waypoint, one that was annoying to find as well. The pulses take a while to travel. I'm no game designer, but I think I would have preferred a map that filled in as I traveled. The Pathless tracks where you go, but you can only see it during the Spirit Vision. If it tracked on a map, I'd still be able to see where I've been, but maybe the sense of exploration could have held out for a bit longer. And finding all the collectibles rewards you twice over. The more lanterns found, the higher the eagle can fly, the easier it is to get around. And if all the light stones are collected, the hunter gets a neat power-up that makes moving around a bit faster too. Which is to say, it's really useful to get everything in the game because the game gets more fun as you do. It's just unfortunate that to do so, finding secrets becomes very straightforward. Once the hunter has solved enough puzzles and lit all 3 lighthouses, it's time to purify a god. Now tasked with heading right into the storm orb locked in the center of the area, these boss fights have the hunter doing some absolutely sick stuff. Each battle usually has a couple different segments, but they all pull from various aspects from the game that the player should be well versed in by this point. Initially, the hunter needs to chase after the god, picking off targets, jumping over terrain, all to get and shoot targets on the tall ones themselves. Then, each boss fight usually has a more traditional types of bosses, dodge attacks and wait for an opening, but they're all really fun and rewarding. Plus, the accompanying music excellently transforms the game from a calm, wondering experience to a hype, energetic battle. All of the music is pretty good. Composed by Austin Wintory, over 100 people performed on the soundtrack. Together they made a strange mix of orchestra and Asian-sounding instrumentation. The most striking being the throat singers that accent most tracks, but the total amount of instruments used is vast. They got a contrabassoon. They used a bass kazoo, as well as many traditional Asian instruments. And I do have to be broad when I say Asian instrumentation, as Wintory took influences from all over the place. It's really impossible to nail down just a handful of countries. Well, maybe Wintory could, but I cannot. While all the music is technically impressive and every piece fits the game thematically, it was all just kind of super forgettable for me. During the game, it sets the tone perfectly, whether I was running around, exploring an ancient temple, or running from a god. But then the piece ends, and I forget it was even there. The score is more in line with most film soundtracks. I know many people enjoy listening to film soundtracks, but for me, they really need the visual component to be fully entertaining. Overall though, I had tons of fun with the Pathless. Any exploration system that riffs off of Breath of the Wild sounds good to me. And the fluid movement of running and gunning targets always felt great. The puzzles were never too hard. At their worst, they were a bit derivative of one another, but there were never too many of them to really feel bad. The game is fairly short, only about 15 hours or so nothing ever outstayed its welcome. This is also true of the story, which is fine. It was enough to spark this adventure, a lot of the scattered story was interesting, and it wraps up well at the end, but it was never truly moving. I never felt too invested in the world or its inhabitants. But simply being on this island was enough for me to have a really good time. I give the Pathless a Eagle Hug out of 10. Thank you for watching. Follow my socials at MarioWaith, all links in the description. Like and sub if you want to. Let me know in the comments your favorite island game. No, I will not explain what an island game is. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed. See you next time.